I think everybody is most likely overly familiar with this parable, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I think you've all heard the same homily before. If not, I'd be shocked. And that homily usually would go, "Are you the Good Samaritan? Are you that nasty priest, that evil, wicked Levite? Are you the Good Samaritan who cares for the man in the ditch?" But I take a little bit of issue with that, because I've never been able to identify with the priest or the Levite, or the Samaritan for that matter. You see, when I approach this text, I kind of want to ask the question, but what if I'm the Jew in the ditch? He gets overlooked, but he is the main character in the story, this beaten, dying Jew in the ditch. And if you read Luke's gospel, well, if you read any of the Gospels, you know that the Gospels kind of have their own thrust, their own purpose. You have Matthew, who's trying to preach to a church of Jewish converts to Christianity, to show them how Jesus fulfills the prophecies. You read Mark's Gospel, and it's very quickly clear that he's writing right after Peter and Paul have died, and he's just writing quick, get it out before they kill the rest of us. Make sure that people hear the message before we all die. And then you read John's, and it's quite clear that he took years and years and years to write his gospel. Right? He's the only one that didn't die a martyr's death, who died an old man on the island Patmos after being exiled. And he sat down, and his gospel is written as an understanding of his reflection of what God revealed to him about his time with Jesus on earth in his contemplative prayer. It's a prayer journal. But Luke's gospel, Luke writes with a very unique purpose. Luke writes an instruction manual to his people, to his church. This is how you become a disciple. This is how you live this new life as a follower of Christ. Here are the basic instructions for how you are to live up to this identity, how you are to fulfill your call. This is how you complete the work of your baptism in your life. This is the life that you are to live. And if you read Luke's gospel, he gives little clues on how to do that. Right? Luke includes a lot of Christ's parables in his gospel. And if you notice, in the vast majority of the parables in Luke's gospel, there's always an unnamed and undescribed person. And the invitation is that it's not that Luke doesn't know who these people are. It's that he's inviting the reader to enter the story in that position. The priest is named the priest. The Levite's named the Levite. The Samaritan's named the Samaritan. Even the scholar of the law is named scholar of the law. But the one dead in the ditch, what does he call him? A man fell victim to robbers. That's all we know about him. But to really unpack this, this man is leaving Jerusalem to go to Jericho. And if you stop right there, that's a whole homily in itself. And the name of that homily is "Don't Leave Jerusalem for Jericho." Because if you remember, when the Israelites entered the Promised Land, they entered by way of Jericho. And that's the first town that they had to conquer. And you have that beautiful liturgical procession of them surrounding the city of Jericho and blowing the trumpet, and after 7 days it falls. But Jericho is low, physically, geographically. It's a low place. It's right next to the Dead Sea, which is the lowest place on earth. Whereas Jerusalem is, it's a hill. It's a mountain. It's Mount Zion. And to go down from Jerusalem to Jericho means to leave what God has given on Mount Zion in the Promised Land, in the capital city. It's to leave the treasures of heaven. It's to leave this place where we find union with God, and it's to descend to the city of vice and sin, which is the first thing that's conquered in the spiritual life. We don't just say, okay, tomorrow I'm a Christian and now I'm perfectly united with God and I have eternal beatitude and bliss and I'm happy. No, we all know that the Christian life has struggles. And the very first struggle is the conquering of sin in my life. And that's what Jericho is. Jericho is a dirty, sinful city. And so when someone goes down from Jerusalem to Jericho, You got to ask why. What are they doing? And so when he's on his way to Jericho, he gets jumped by a bunch of robbers from Jericho. In other words, here are the people who make this city what it is. They make it fun and alluring with their sinful activities, their whatever. I don't want to go into it, but let your imaginations go. Here are the people who make the city what it is. They allure, they attract, they pull, they persuade. Come and enjoy this place of pleasure, this place of excitement, this place of sin. But we don't call it that. Just come and enjoy these things. And what do? They rob him, strip him of his clothes, beat him, and leave him for half dead. Is that not what the world tends to do to us? Come enjoy this thing. This thing will make you feel good, right? If you give into this sin, it's really okay. Come have fun. And what happens is when we engage in those activities, it drains the life from us. And then we're sitting there wondering why we're so miserable. We're left for half dead. And so as this half dead, beaten, bloodied, naked Jew in the ditch lies there, a priest walks by and passes on the other side. And the Samaritan, and the Levite walks by and passes on the other side. Why? Did you notice where they're going? They too are leaving Jerusalem for Jericho. They're compromised. They're not men of integrity. These are men that have turned their backs on what they're supposed to be about. These are priests and Levites in disgrace. How can they heal the sinner when they themselves are descending into a den of iniquity? The Samaritan, on the other hand, he's not a Jew. He's a Samaritan. He doesn't pretend to be about what the Jews are about. Now imagine lying in the ditch as a Jew, and all you want is for someone to help you, to save you. I mean, it's assumed that he can't just get up and start walking. He's pretty badly beaten. He's naked. He's half dead. And all he wants, what does he want? He wants one of his own to come save him. And he looks up and he sees this compromised priest and this compromised Levite, and they pass him and he becomes discouraged. And then he looks up again and he sees this Samaritan, and I almost could guarantee you, in his mind, he's screaming, "No! Don't touch me. You're a Samaritan. You're not the way I want to be made right. You're not the way I want to be saved. You're not the way I want to get out of this. Please leave me." But the Samaritan, who is an enemy of Judaism, bends over and pours oil and wine over this Jew in the ditch's wounds. He picks him up and puts him on his own animal, a Samaritan animal. And he carries him to an inn, cares for him, and then pays the innkeeper to continue to care for him. This Jew in the ditch is me. That's how we have to read this. We decide sometimes to leave the life of grace, to pursue whatever it is that we think is going to bring us pleasure or contentment or even happiness. And when we leave the light of grace to pursue those things, it leaves us naked and bloodied and beaten and half dead. And we sit there waiting to be saved in the ways that we want to be saved. But God doesn't operate the way that I want him to operate. He operates the way he decides. This Samaritan in the story is Jesus. It's not a mistake that he anoints the wounds with oil and wine, prefigurements of the sacraments. I always carry this little leather pouch in my pocket. It's nothing really special. The most valuable thing is probably the pouch itself, monetarily speaking at least. But in this little leather pouch, I carry oil in little vials, stuffed with cotton balls so the oil doesn't run all over my pocket. Because when I encounter people who are hurting, or sick, or half dead, what does the church instruct to do? Call on the presbyters and have them anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. When we're suffering and we're sick and we're dying, what we need is the oil of gladness, the oil of the sick, this little bit of olive oil blessed by the bishop. Because it's through his sacrament of anointing of the sick that our sufferings are consecrated and configured to the Lord. It's no mistake that on the road of Jericho, this Samaritan pours wine on this Jew in the ditch's wounds. Because it's by the blood of the Lamb that we're freed from our sin. It's by the Eucharist that we're nourished. It's by the Eucharist that we're freed. It's by the blood poured out of the side of the Lamb of God that we are made whole and given life again and anew. This wine is the Eucharist. Because when we fall victim to the robbers on the way to the den of iniquity, which we do, we need someone to help us get back up. And it's going to be most likely the way that we don't want it to happen, in confession, where I can pick you up. I can take you out of the ditch in that little broom closet. And I can carry you to the inn of the nave of the church and care for you. I can turn you over to the innkeeper and let him care for you when I cannot. I can bind your wounds with the oil of the sick. I can sterilize the infection of sin with the Eucharist, the blood of the Lamb. But too often we don't want to be saved the way that God has created for us to be saved. We look for our own measures, we look for our own tries, we look for our own methods. But it's not that complicated. There are 7 sacraments. And these are the ways in which God reaches it down to heal us. That homily that goes, "Are you the Samaritan, the Levite, or the priest?" I think is a fitting sequel to what I just proclaimed. Because it's after we're healed that we should go out and be that Samaritan to heal others. But I think there's a big problem in that we try to heal others without first allowing Jesus to heal us. In seminary for 8 years, I spent time, an hour every month for each. An hour in spiritual direction and an hour in formation. It's just like, a priest telling you how you're living wrong. And for 8 years I did that every week, or every month. Why? Because the wounded healer can actually heal. We have to acknowledge that we have been wounded by sin and work to overcome it so that we can go out and now be neighbor to our neighbors. Now we can go out and be the hands of Christ, binding wounds after ours have been healed. I can't save you while I'm bleeding to death. I can't help you out of sin while I'm on the road to my sin. But after I've acknowledged that I'm a sinner and allowed God to save me, to heal me, to nourish me, then I can point to you to where I found it. And then you can point people to where you found it. And then the whole world can finally be centered here, on the Eucharist, where the whole world will find healing and peace.